What's up, y'all? Welcome to another Golden Record track breakdown, and welcome to our final week. We've made it, just a few more of these left, and we will have dissected every single track off of this album. So to kick this week off, we're going to be talking about track 11 off of the album, which is called The Weight That You Carry. Now, almost everybody that I've talked to about this track seems to feel like they have their own deeper meaning as to what the track means or things like that, and I'm certainly not going to sit here and tell anybody that they are outrightly incorrect, but we are going to dive a little bit deeper into what my inspiration and ideas for the track are, as well as sort of what the overall scope of what I was going for. So, as we've talked about in some of the other videos, the Golden Record was a long process, about a year and a half from first song made to final song finished. And in that time, I consumed as many movies, TV shows, and video games as I could. I mean, in general, those are my go-to sort of sources for entertainment, but really, as I was making this album, I wanted to experience as many different stories as possible. And one of the stories that I spent probably 4.5 months in was Red Dead Redemption 2. If you're unfamiliar with the video game, it's a story about sort of the kind of a classic outlaws and cowboys story, but the second game really focuses kind of on the fall and the downfall of the golden age of outlaws, as it were, in the Wild Wild West. And so really, though, at the core of the game, the story is about a man trying to figure out what the purpose to everything is and sort of what the reasoning is behind the things that he does. And so obviously you can tell there's a lot of those themes that cross over from Red Dead 2 to the Golden Record. And so as I was working on this track and it started moving that way, you know, we added some of these guitars and some of our more environmental things, it was becoming quite apparent to me that there was a lot of weight in this track. And so then that takes us to the name, The Weight That You Carry, which is absolutely a reference to You're Gonna Carry That Weight, one of the last lines from Cowboy Bebop. And that in turn is a reference to the track Carry That Weight by the Beatles. So there's many different interpretations of those lines, both from the show and what the song that the Beatles wrote means. But for me, it's always kind of been about, great, you have all of your past experiences and you have all of your goals and anxieties for future experiences, and for the entirety of the rest of your life, you're going to carry the weight of those experiences, both past and present. And every person that you interact with and every person that you meet and you learn from, you're going to carry some of their weight too. And so it's ultimately just sort of a song about the final kind of culmination of all of your life's experiences. Very much a track that is, to me, if we were, again, we go back to our movie version. I talk about this a lot, but in the movie version of this track is like, a man or a person who's very aware that they are about to meet the end of their life and that they're doing it on their terms. So that's enough kind of about the background of the track. Let's go ahead and dive into Ableton and see what makes up The Weight That You Carry. So now that we're in Ableton, right off the top, you can see that this track follows a very classic kind of layering pattern. Throughout the whole piece, we start with an initial soundscape, and then we add muted guitar, second guitar, the bells, the piano, and for the most part, nothing's changing up what it's doing. You can look at these waveforms, and throughout the entirety of the piece, for the most part, they're following the same pattern the entire time, just continuing to add more and more layers until eventually we do take more away. So with that said, we got to talk about the very first thing that you hear, which is the atmosphere. Now, I've talked about the atmosphere before in the past with some of the rains and things, but as you will see with these, and as you have seen with those, look, y'all, layers. Layer, 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 layer. It's all about the layering. So we have 3 different things that comprise the atmosphere of this track. We have this desert at night, which you can hear isolated. Just some nighttime desert noises. We have this campfire going. Yeah. What a nice campfire. And there's a little bit of sort of outdoor textures as well in there. You can hear a little bit of sort of like nature sounds. But for the most part, we're just listening to our campfire. And then we've got, of course, our coyotes. Yeah, listen to that coyote. And the coyotes are hella reverb. You can see that we've got them pumped up all the way, max reverb. We've got our desert noises just a little bit less, but still a lot in there. And then the campfire, I didn't want too much reverb on that just because I wanted it to really sound a bit closer to it. You know, the whole thing with this environmental and the purpose of these layerings is to create a rich environment that immediately you can like put yourself into, or you as a listener can put yourself into. So we've got our coyotes, our desert, and our campfire. They're all doing their thing. And then, of course, we bring in our very first muted guitar. And we'll just listen to what this guitar is doing. You can tell, again, lots of reverb on this song. And you can even hear in this sample, there's a bit of like outdoor kind of quality to it. You can kind of hear maybe some bugs or something in the background. And so really quickly, as I was settling on these things and I was digging through samples and stuff that I had, when I heard that, I was like, oh shit, this is very much what I'm trying to get to. As we talked about a little bit in the intro, you know, the idea of this song is someone collecting themselves, facing the end, but on their own terms. And so if we sort of follow the overarching story throughout the entirety of the album, excuse me. So we have, anger, which is anger in its purest form. We have propulsion, which is the harnessing of that anger and what you can do beneficially with that. And then we have the weight that you carry, which is as we go into happiness, it's kind of this idea of only now, kind of at the end, when you've reflected upon everything, can you prepare yourself to be truly happy. And that's not to say you can't be truly happy before the end, but I do think in the case of this story and the story of the Golden Record, it fit a bit more with the idea of aging. So, you know, if you remember back to Children of Earth, we talked about how there were some of those children kind of youthful noises in there. And that was because, one, the name of the song is Children of Earth, so we wanted some of that. But as I said to you then, throughout the whole of the album, there's kind of this idea of aging and the perspective that you get through aging. And so we start as children before fear, and then we're at this point now going into happiness. And we've very much gone on an arc of a lifetime, sort of, for what the idea was for the album. And so at this point we have our focus is a person who is sitting here. They're aware that likely what they're about to do will be the thing that is the end of them. And yet there's a piece to it. There's a certain amount of, I'm prepared for this. So we have our muted guitar, which comes in, and it sounds so good when you bring it in with the atmosphere. They just blend so perfectly. Like you can feel the warmth of the fire, you know, like you can put yourself in this environment very easily. So then from there, we bring in this wonderful second guitar, and this is the guitar that's kind of doing a little bit more story-wise. It's got a little bit of call and response between it and the muted guitar. You hear them interacting with each other. I just love the way that those two sound together. There's a lot of weight to it. I know I've said that before. I said it in the intro. I'll probably say it again before this breakdown is through. But it is why the song is called what it is. There's weight involved. So then we come back to our bell. This bell has been here the entire time, even in Children of Earth. It's all about this idea of longevity. So the bell is back to continue telling its story. We'll listen to it just isolated. Gosh, it's such a good sample. I love how these things sound. And the bell very much is doing its own thing the entire time. You know, for the most part, it's playing one note and just sort of ringing out. But as we move into the more musical sections, we do have it semi-switch up its note pattern. But for the most part, it's a steady progression. Same with the piano. We'll listen to what the piano is doing next. We'll go ahead and solo it. You know, there's a little warble to this piano. It sounds kind of old, you know, it sounds tired. This piano's been used, you know. We got a bit of EQ on it, little compression, then some side EQ going on, and then again, this utility is mostly just pushing our mid frequencies up a bit, because there is a lot of kind of warble to this piano. There was a lot of interesting kind of textures happening in the side frequencies that I just didn't want too much of, which is why we've got more of our mid focused here. So that's our guitars, our bells, and the piano, and we'll listen to all of them here together because, that was the thing with this song is as I continued layering, there's a moment where it's like, okay, when is there enough? When am I reaching sort of the height of the intensity that I have? And I love the way that all of the parts interact with each other. Listen to the muted guitar and the guitar having their call and response, and then the bell, even though it comes in before the piano, is very much having its own conversation with the piano. You hear how they play with each other? You bring in our atmosphere, and it just helps to kind of glue everything together. That atmosphere is there the entire song. So that's our main sort of melodic things in there. Then we do bring in our bass. Let's go ahead and listen to it. Again, it's nothing. Most of the parts in this track are not very complicated, but they do help to, just sort of build up the overall feel and the sort of, just kind of the intensity, as it were. So let's listen to what the bass is doing. And as you can tell, the RC20 definitely on this thing. You can hear all kinds of interesting sort of pitch warbles and wobbles and things like that. You see we got the wobble up, the distortion, a bit of digital distortion happening in here as well, and a little magnetic fluctuation, a little bit of noise in there just to kind of make it that much more, kind of wonky. That's presence is there throughout that kind of wonkiness, that interesting sort of weird little fractures of things. That's been present throughout the whole album. As I've said at the beginning, back in Children of Earth, the RC20 is doing a lot of heavy lifting on this album. So then before we bring in our marching snare, we're going to go ahead and jump on over into our trumpets. And both these trumpets and the snare, those were recorded in that BBC plugin that I was showing y'all in Propulsion. But definitely, Spitfire, check it out. You got to check it out. I've talked about them a lot. We won't, go into a whole big dive in again. But, it's just to say, you got to check out what you could do with some inexpensive tools. So let's listen to these trumpets. I love how the trumpets sound. And for me, the trumpets do a lot of the emotional lifting for the final bit of the track. The trumpets are they are, for me, what tells the story of I accept what's about to happen to me, Everything else is sort of an inevitability, but the trumpets have a confidence to them. Same with that guitar lead, which we'll get into here in a minute. But they all have a bit of a confidence to them that, to me, it really helps, sort of sell that, I'm meeting my fate with a smile on my face kind of thing. And they really build, especially as this guitar lead comes in. The guitar and the trumpets really help to tell that story of, we're moving forward, we can do this, I'm prepared for whatever lies ahead of me. You can see we've got, a bit of reverb on them, and then there's a bit of side chain in here from our pads, which we'll get down to just to create a little more room for them in the overall mix. But there's nothing too crazy as far as effects on the trumpets. A lot of them it's just sort of kind of emphasizing the natural sound of the plugin. So a bit of EQ boosting in the range of the key of the song. We've got some light compression, and then a little more sort of side EQ that we've talked about before. So that's our trumpets. Then let's move back up before we get to our guitar, and we'll talk about this snare, this marching snare. And this was something that came out of that BBC Orchestra plugin that I have through Spitfire. There's some percussive elements in there as well. So it's not just even orchestral. It's like full orchestra, brass, winds, percussion. You need all of it to make it happen. And the snare, for the most part, is doing a similar pattern throughout the whole thing. We do have the Diablo plugin just to give it a bit more presence, a bit more body. And then a lot of it is coming from just a bit of this gain automation happening here, that slowly throughout its part, it gets louder and louder as we get closer and closer to sort of those final impacts. You can really start to hear it getting louder here, and then it's a bit more exponential as we move up into our final sort of 8-bar count. So, and again, that's just that slight automation that just adds a bit more presence and pressure build up to when we take more and more away. So before we can go into our full kind of breakdown moment, let's talk about this guitar lead, which is another example of me basically playing something on a synth and then throwing guitar rig on it, which is that plugin we talked about earlier, which was, you can get a free version. I'm using the free version. I do not have the paid version of it, and you can still get some phenomenal sounds. So this is synth, but it is now being turned into guitar. I just love the progression. My computer's struggling. But it had a bit of that, definitely influenced by Ennio Morricone, who is the very famous Italian composer who did the music for so many things, Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, probably the most famous. We all know the kind of like that classic, it's just, he is spaghetti Western music. So I definitely pulled a bit from that. And he's always had, the spaghetti Westerns, there's always an element of that kind of electric guitar in there. But I also, Quentin Tarantino is a huge influence of mine, and he regularly uses this kind of electric guitar. Same with Robert Rodriguez and his movies. There's a lot of that electric guitar mixed into kind of the, bigger orchestral or Wild West theme. And so for me, that's really what this is. It serves that purpose. There's a forward momentum, another sense of acknowledgement and confidence that comes from that guitar lead coming in, which further tells the story. Now, you can see we build up. Everything has been building up to us taking more of this stuff away. So let's talk about our breakdown. And in the breakdown, we'll talk about this Vox, which has been present ever since the trumpets came in. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is this guitar breakdown, which is more so of a textural thing, but I'll let you listen to it soloed. You hear that? It's not really doing anything crazy melodic wise, but it adds, in the grand scheme of everything, you can hear, I don't know, it adds an extra bit of understanding. It's a new voice that we haven't heard throughout the entirety of this piece that comes in with these pads and these plucks, which we're going to get to here in a second. And I just thought it served a really good, almost outside perspective on the rest of everything that has built up to that. And then we'll return more to our first person perspective when we bring back our muted guitar and our piano. But it's kind of like maybe sort of the aftermath of the event that everything has been building up to here. The snare is very reminiscent of kind of the classic Dead Man's March snare that you would hear when someone was going to be hung. Classic pirate movies, Western movies. If you've watched those, you'll know what I'm talking about. And so, again, if we're talking about the movie of this song, I do think that it is a person that is facing their death. It's not necessarily through hanging, maybe it's a firing line, maybe it's they know that they're about to sort of be the final line of defense between the people they need to protect and the people trying to attack them. Who knows? That's kind of the idea. But that definitely, that breakdown, this outside perspective of everything that's just happened. So we get that with the breakdown, and the breakdown and the lead, they talk to each other so well. It's all about conversation. Listen to how they interact with each other. Yeah, and it just it is. It's it's kind of like to me, it feels like the guitar is the person who we've been following this whole time, and this guitar breakdown is someone who's known them and is present here at the end of everything. A little deeper, going kind of deep into this one, but yeah, that's kind of the nature of the track. So that's the guitar breakdown. We also introduce these pads, and this pluck also come in. Now the pads, they very much are a thing to just listen to together, because they almost combine to create one sound as opposed to being individual sounds. So just what you just heard, I'm just going to solo the top pad so you can hear what that sounds like first. You see that? And then just this bottom one, which sounds very similar. Like they like I said, they combine to create essentially one sound. And then we have this little pluck element as well, which we'll listen to. Yeah, that's a pluck. Simple. But it adds an extra little element, an extra little percussive thing in there. And when you listen to sort of all of these things together, when you hear like, we've got our pads, and then we bring in, this little pluck, and then our little guitar breakdown, and just sort of listen to all of this here together. You hear how they all interact with each other? And then, they're kind of bare bones on their own, but with these little elements, these extra little textures in there really help to add some ear candy, especially to the fact that we've been building up to something. We need variation when we finally reach that point of what we've been building up to. So that's what those are doing. Now, let's talk about these vox, and they're present from the moment that the trumpets come in. And again, it's something that sounds more kind of complete when you listen to them all on their own. If you go through each thing individually, they're not too, impactful on their own, but all together they create, there's this sort of, kind of, I don't know, there's a choral element to it that kind of gave me this sort of sadness. There's this or a bit of finality to this vox section. And I just kind of liked how it sounded. Again, more ear candy as we bring in our trumpets and things, and with the atmosphere too, you can tell, okay, cool, there's a chunk where the coyotes are gone, and then we bring our coyotes back in as we return back to sort of that initial theme of the piece. So really quickly, I'm just going to go ahead and we will play and kind of listen through this guitar coming in, and then through the outro. And I really want y'all to just sort of listen to how everything interplays with each other. Listen to the interaction between each part, and as we go out of one idea and return to another. Also, just quickly apologizing in case my computer does anything too weird, but hopefully it'll behave itself. So let's check this out. You hear the guitar come in, and how they really interact with the bigness of that trumpet. This trumpet section is huge, That snare's building up. Now you're ready to listen to all of the things that come in the breakdown. It's like that interaction, that conversation between, X-23 and Logan, or, it's that final moment between our hero and the person that they've been trying to protect this whole time. And then we return, we have our coyotes come back in, and we're back to our initial soundscape, this piano and this muted guitar, and it just creates a really nice sort of thematical outro of anger and the anger section of the album, leading us into our final bits of happiness and closing the album out. So that's that. So that was The Weight That You Carry. Like I said, lots of kind of Wild West influence in there, but also a lot of weight and gravity to the entirety of the piece. We're in the final stretch now, just a few more of these left, so thank you all so much for rocking with me on these breakdowns. I can't wait to do these last few for y'all, and I'll catch y'all on the next one.